Hey there, guys. Welcome to your English class. We are down to your third topic. Again, this is Miss Kyla, your English teacher, and today we will be discussing a new lesson. But before we start, if you could still recall, the last instructional video that we had was about personal pronouns, right? Let's do a quick recall. Again, what is a personal pronoun? Can you remember? Okay. A personal pronoun is a word that we use as a simple substitute for the proper names of people, place, thing, or an event. Okay? Again, what are the three aspects that we have to consider when using personal pronouns? We have three, right? The first is number, which includes singular and plural number. Next is the person. The first person, second person, and third person when using pronouns. And the third aspect is the case. When using pronouns in sentences, you have to consider if it is used as a subjective, objective, or possessive case. You remember that? If yes, let's try one sentence. Let us test if you really did good during your previous quiz. Okay? We have Albert brought his car in the picnic. Where is your pronoun? Your pronoun here is his. Okay? His is a personal pronoun that you use to substitute for the noun Albert, right? Okay? I also asked you to name the number, identify the person, and the case of the pronoun that you have chosen. Once we have his, which replaces Albert as a noun, its number is singular. Its person is third person, if you could still recall. And then its case, because it is attached with the noun car, it shows ownership. That's why the case of this pronoun his is in possessive case. I hope you have answered your worksheets correctly. Now let us proceed to the next topic. Do you know that using personal pronouns, we can form two other kinds of pronouns? How? Okay, by simply using the ending self or selves, which can be added to some of the personal pronouns that we know, we could form a reflexive or an intensive pronoun. How is it possible? Let's pick some of the familiar personal pronouns that we have. Let's have him. Him plus self is equal to himself. Okay, so the personal pronoun him, we added it with an ending self. We have formed himself, which is considered as reflexive or intensive pronoun. Next is her. Her plus self, we already have herself. Okay, let's try it with plural personal pronouns. Let's try them. Plus selves is equal to themselves. That is already a reflexive or an intensive pronoun. Another is your. Your plus selves is equal to yourselves. Now we have himself, herself, themselves, and yourselves. We have created new set or new kind of pronouns from the previous topic, which are personal pronouns. Well, reflexive and intensive pronouns both end in self or selves, but they are different in their function in sentence. Later, we will discuss how these two pronouns differ in function. But first, let's take a look at the list of 8 reflexive and intensive pronouns used in language. We have here a chart showing the 8 pronouns which ends in self or selves, which we could also use as a reflexive or intensive pronoun. We have here the first person singular is myself. Second person singular is yourself. Third person singular, himself, herself, and itself. Next we have the plural first person is ourselves. Second person plural, yourselves. And third person plural is themselves. You have to remember that there are only 8 reflexive or intensive pronouns that you guys can use in forming your sentences. And this can either be used as a reflexive or an intensive pronoun. But the problem is, if they appear the same, how can we tell which one is reflexive, which one is intensive? Well, their difference will be seen once we use them in sentences. That's why you have to listen closely so you will understand how these two pronouns differ from one another. Are you ready? Let's start with a reflexive pronoun. A reflexive pronoun sounds like the word reflection, right? Reflection is an image in the mirror that bounces back at you. Well, a reflexive pronoun tells us that whoever is doing the action in your sentence is also the one receiving that action. In other words, a reflexive pronoun reflects back to the subject. Let's take a look at one example we have here. Jane prepared herself for the ball. Where is your reflexive pronoun? This is herself. Herself is a substitute for the noun Jane. In this example, Jane is the doer of the action. She is the one preparing for the ball. Jane is also the topic of your sentence. We can consider Jane as the subject. So what is her action? She is preparing. The verb is prepared. So this is the verb in your sentence. Who is she preparing? She is preparing herself. Jane prepared herself. So herself here is a direct object which receives the action of the doer Jane. Okay? For the ball is just a prepositional phrase. So your sentence pattern here is subject, transitive verb, direct object, and prepositional phrase. Meaning herself is one of the sentence pattern. Herself is the direct object. You see, Jane is the one doing the action, but she is also the one receiving the action. She is preparing for the ball, and who is she preparing? She's preparing herself. This is how a reflexive pronoun functions in your sentence. It tells us that whoever performs the action in the sentence is also the one receiving the end of the action. Remember that a reflexive pronoun always adds information to your sentence. It answers a question. Earlier, the question answered was, who is she preparing? That is a direct object. It could be used as a direct object, indirect object, or also an object of the preposition in your sentence. Let's have another example. We have, they poured themselves some milk. What is your subject? The subject is they. So they is your topic. What is their action? The verb is poured. What did they pour? Milk. That's your direct object. For whom did they pour the milk? For themselves. That is indirect object. In this example, the reflexive pronoun themselves is used or is acting as an indirect object. So your sentence pattern is S, T, V, I, O, and D, O. Okay? I have here another example of a reflexive pronoun used in a sentence. The puppy saw itself in the mirror. Itself here is the direct object in your sentence. The pronoun itself refers back to the subject. What's the subject? The puppy. In other words, the puppy saw the puppy in the mirror. The puppy, who is the doer of the action, saw itself, is also the one receiving the action of being seen. Okay? What will really help you determine the pronoun as a reflexive is by asking yourself a question. To break down your sentence just like what we're doing earlier. The puppy saw itself in the mirror. What is your subject? Puppy. That's your subject. What is the verb? Saw. What did he see? Itself. That's your direct object. So whenever your reflexive pronoun answers an important question in your sentence, it tells you that it is a part of the sentence pattern and it is reflexive. It is important. It receives the action of the doer. That is why it is called as a reflexive pronoun. So is it clear now? Let's now proceed to the other kind of pronoun that ends in self or selves. We call it as intensive pronoun. Intensive pronoun is like intense, the word intense. It intensifies. When you are intensifying something, you will have to give emphasis, right? And that is exactly what an intensive pronoun does. It emphasizes a preceding noun, which is often, but not always, the noun immediately before the intensive pronoun. An intensive pronoun may look like a reflexive pronoun, but its function is different in a sentence. Its only function is to give emphasis. Let us try an example. The queen herself gave the knight an award. What's your subject? Subject is the queen. What did she do? What's the verb? That is, gave. What did she give? She gave an award. That is the direct object. To whom did she give the award? To the knight. Well, in this case, it is very clear that the only purpose of herself is to give emphasis to the action done by the queen, that she herself gave the award. And that's a big deal. Why? Because she's not just anybody. She's the queen. The queen herself gave an award to the knight. So even if we remove this intensive pronoun herself in this sentence, the idea that the queen gave the knight an award is still complete. Remember that removing an intensive pronoun in your sentence will not affect the meaning of your sentence, nor will it ruin your sentence. Why? Because its only purpose as an intensive pronoun is to simply add emphasis on the doer doing the action. And if you remove it, the sentence will still contain the same basic information that it already has. Okay? Also, you have to remember that an intensive pronoun has two placements in your sentence. It could either be placed just after the noun it substitutes, or it can be placed at the end of your sentence. Earlier, we have placed herself just beside the queen that it substitutes. Again, the queen herself gave the knight an award. That is only the first placement of your pronoun. It is beside the noun that it substitutes. Another placement could be the queen gave the knight an award herself. An intensive pronoun can also be placed at the end part of your sentence. Still, it functions to give emphasis. So these are the two ways on how you place an intensive pronoun in a sentence. Do you now understand the concept of intensive pronouns? If yes, Then let us try and compare a reflexive and an intensive pronoun. I have here two sentences which are almost identical. And what you'll do is you have to know which sentence has a reflexive and which one uses an intensive pronoun. You have 5 seconds to do it. Are you ready? Let's try. Here is sentence letter A. Jane made a cake herself. And letter B, Jane made herself a cake. Your timer starts now. Alright, time's up. I suppose you already have your answers. Let's try. Let us study these two sentences closely. Letter A, Jane made a cake herself. What's the subject? The subject is Jane. What is the action or what is the verb? It is made. What did Jane make? A cake. For who did she make the cake? I don't know. It is not given in your sentence. So meaning, herself here is only an emphasis to the idea that Jane herself made a cake. So the answer is intensive pronoun. We can also write it the other way. Jane herself made a cake. And even if we remove herself here, the idea of our sentence will not change because the intensive pronoun is just a part of your sentence, but is not a part of your sentence pattern. It is only an emphasis. Let's go check on sentence letter B. We have Jane made herself a cake. What's your subject? Again, your subject is Jane, right? The verb is still made. What did she make? A cake. That's still the direct object. For who was the cake? This time it is for herself. Jane made herself a cake. So herself here is part of the pattern. STVIODO. Herself here is an indirect object. So since herself is a part of the sentence pattern, it answers an important question in your sentence. It gives an added information in your sentence. Then your answer for sentence B should be reflexive pronoun. We cannot remove it from the sentence. Remember that. I hope you have answered that correctly. Because if yes, then that means that you have really understood our discussion for today. Now let us try and summarize the discussion. Always remember that a reflexive and intensive pronoun has a common denominator. And that is that they both end in self or selves. But that is the only one. They are different in many other aspects. Remember that a reflexive always adds information to a sentence, whereas an intensive only adds emphasis. Next is, a reflexive pronoun cannot be removed from your sentence because it is a part of your sentence pattern. It gives an added information in your sentence. Whereas an intensive can always be removed from your sentence. Why? Because even if it's not there, it will not change the meaning of your sentence. Next is, a reflexive pronoun can be used in 3 ways. You can use it either as a direct object, indirect object, or an object of the preposition. Whereas an intensive pronoun is not part of the sentence pattern. It can always be removed. Okay? Alright, we're done discussing the concept of reflexive and intensive pronoun. I hope you have listened carefully, because if you do not know how to differentiate these two pronouns, it will really be very confusing. Okay? And to test if you really have listened to this instructional video, I have attached a link that will serve as your quiz for today's discussion. Also, a copy of this video will be posted on your Facebook page. And if you have questions, you may reach me directly via Facebook Messenger. That's www.facebook.com/kai.gludo. You can also send me an email. That's kyla.gludo@deped.gov.ph. Or send me a text message or call me. That's 0936-551-1909 or 0939-162-5089. In behalf of the English department, we'll try and create more videos exclusively for you guys. I hope you have enjoyed today's discussion. Thank you for listening. Adios.